Hi everyone, welcome to our interview. Today I'm here with Jaap de Wit. Jaap de Wit, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, very shortly, I'm emeritus professor of transport and especially aviation economics at the University of Amsterdam, and I was the former director of the Knowledge Institute, the KIM, the Scientific Institute for Transport Policy Analysis in The Hague.
All right, thank you very much. As I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Matthijs, I'm part of the Aviation Management team and I'll be the interviewer for today. So let's start off. There is much ongoing debate on whether we need a reset in aviation or not. And this COVID-19 pandemic might be a good moment to do so. I would like to further discuss this with you, Jaap. So what do you see sufficient economic reasons for a reset of the post-COVID aviation industry?
Well, actually, speaking about a reset, we discuss structural changes. And in your question, there is an opportunity whether you can steer to more efficiency. In my opinion, we are more or less flooded by COVID-19 and we have to cope with it. So it is not a steering process, but it is a reaction on a high impact shock event. So the real point is that everybody is speaking about structural changes in the air transport industry, and then the focus is on some, in my opinion, minor points in travel behavior like teleconferencing or focusing on substitution by air transport. But I think that is not the main issue. The main issue is primarily the reset of the industry itself, and thereafter you see some changes in travel behavior, but these are not the leading issues in the air transport system. So my first point is what is happening and what can we expect in the airline industry itself as a response to COVID-19. And actually, that is the supply side of the air transport system. Later on, I'll go in a little more detail about the travel behavior, the demand side. Well, if you keep in mind that this is an unprecedented high impact shock event, which is indeed unprecedented, we have to cope with tremendous losses in the next few years. For example, a well-known consultancy firm in London, Aviation Strategy, already existing for very decades, they indicate, to give you a flavor about the losses, they indicate about $100 billion in net loss in the next 2 years. That is about 50% of the net profit since World War II in the airline industry. So half of the profits made in the decades after 1945 are now lost. So
that's impressive.
It is a real shock. And actually, IATA and Eurocontrol indicate that this is not over in a few minutes. It takes about 5 years to be back on the pre-COVID levels. So it is a tremendous shock. And how will this be absorbed by the total air transport system? That's the interesting question. And there you have the structural changes. Let's start with the airlines. Full service carriers will further concentrate in the near future despite state aid there will be takeovers, there will be bankruptcies, and a further concentration of this segment in the airline industry will continue. One of the optimist elements in it that they will be much more competitive thanks to much more consciousness. They are much slimmer in cost after these disasters than before, and thereby their competitive reactions to the low-cost carriers might be very interesting to follow. The next one is low-cost carriers. Well, more or less they are very flexible in their cost structure, so they can cope a little with it. Look at Wizz Air. Wizz Air is rapidly expanding now in Europe. Ryanair will cope with the problems. So low-cost carriers in the continent of Europe will more or less take a larger pie of the market. The other interesting one is long-haul low cost. They will disappear in the near future. WoW Air, Norwegian, they can't cope with the yield management systems of full service carriers anymore. And last but not least, the already ongoing concentration of the leisure airlines as part of the tour operators, the big tour operators, they are now in their final stage of concentration. Yeah. You see the struggling of TUI. Well, so far for airlines, a fundamental structural change of further concentration, etc., etc. Airports. Airports are losing a lot of money now. Terminal capacity has to be redefined for social distancing. Planned investments will be postponed. They try to diversify by looking at real estate developments outside the airport to gain some money. And especially smaller tourist airports, they may close in the near future. So another structural one. And last but not least, aircraft and engine manufacturers. An increasing stock of white tails can be expected. Early retirement of the elder aircraft. You see all the 747s being parked away now, and increasing deferrals of deliveries of new aircraft. So this will bounce back on the manufacturers, on the engine manufacturers, and well, the increasing stock of whitetails have to be coped with in the next 5 years. As you see, it is going through the total value chain of air transport in general. And well, everybody will focus on structural and strategic adaptations to a recovery of the market.
Is the European Commission's Green Deal an additional argument for a reset in the aviation industry in the coming decades?
Well, it is strongly underlined that this is a big issue. However, I doubt whether it is. It is about a scheduled collective travel within the 500 kilometers distance, have to be carbon neutral in 2030. And that's interesting if you take the Schiphol case. The Schiphol case, about 500 kilometers, that concerns less than 10 destinations from Schiphol, 10 major and minor destinations. If you calculate the substitution between air and rail based on substantial improvement of the rail services, you might expect, mind you, 4% passenger transfer to the rail and 4% less traffic at Amsterdam Airport in the next 10 years. So
that's not very big, that's not significant.
It's a minor issue, and everybody is focusing on air transport. The solution for air transport is rail transport. Well, that's okay if you are willing to develop a complete new network, and that is building rail lines, and that is very costly. So the choice is in decarbonizing the air transport by electrification or by biofuels, or um, construction of rail links, which is very costly and a lot of environmental impact as well. So it is wise to reconsider a little this impact on travel behavior. And another problem is that we expect a huge impact of changing behavior due to teleconferencing,
Yeah.
as a substitute for air travel.
So it's about the passenger behavior.
That is about passenger behavior. So, what about the question of is teleconferencing also a generator of air travel? Nobody gives the answer until now. The other one is, aren't we saturated by teleconferencing in the last few months? And another one is we are substantially underestimating business travel, as well, it is usually with tongue in cheek called tourism in a business suit. And that is, it is a kind of soft benefit in labor conditions that your international travel is a part of your job. So the willingness to fly is not over, and actually there is an interesting reservoir of unfulfilled travel needs in the near future, from tourism as well as from business travel. So I have my doubts about the longer term effects of teleconferencing on the air travel. It is an issue which is already on the table since 1985 about that, and the first publications and papers were issued which announced a substantial shift and substitution from air to teleconferencing. I have my doubts whether that is the issue. But anyway, for the near future, travel behavior will be influenced by GDP and by world trade. And actually, both of them are not very favorable in the next few years for air travel. So we have to expect a very slow recovery in air transport, and as indicated by the major forecasters, it will take about 5 years before we expect to be able to cope with levels of pre-COVID. Anyway, decarbonization is on the table, and definitely this will have an impact on air transport as well. And probably there is some analogy between the speed of developing a COVID-19 vaccine within a year and electrification of aircraft in the near future. If the focus is on that solution, I'm convinced that the problems even after 2030 will be handled by, let's say, technological innovations in the airline industry itself.
Thank you very much, Jaap, for this interview. We appreciate the time and effort you took for us, and thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, and a lot of success with the conference organization.